Between 1955 and 1960, Britain lived inside a housing transition that shaped an entire generation. Streets changed, families changed, daily life changed, and every home told a story about a nation trying to rebuild its future after the war. Subscribe to the channel today for more stories about Britain's homes between 1955 and 1960. Most families still felt the effects of late rationing. Coal was expensive. Building materials were limited. Many households lived in small terraced houses with damp walls and narrow kitchens. Others were placed in prefabs that were meant to last 10 years but were still standing. New council estates appeared outside major cities. Rows of semi-detached homes stretched across former fields. Young couples moved in with hope and very few possessions. A single wireless tuned to the BBC Home Service played in the background. The population was growing fast. Streets filled with prams and children playing near corner shops. Local buses carried workers from these new suburbs to factories rebuilt after wartime damage. Demand for housing increased every year. Home ownership became a national goal. Families compared prices in local newspapers. They dreamed of moving from council tenancy to a mortgage they could call their own. The idea of stability pushed people to consider deposits, payments, and long-term plans. Housing shaped routines. Washing lines filled small gardens. Coal sheds stood behind back doors. Neighbours shared tools for minor repairs. Britain was still recovering, but the foundation of the modern suburban lifestyle was forming. This was the beginning of a housing race that would define the next decade. By the mid-1950s, council estates covered large areas of Britain's towns and cities. These estates offered affordable rent, basic comfort, and a sense of safety for families leaving overcrowded Victorian terraces. Streets were organised, green spaces were added, and local shops appeared near bus stops and schools. Council houses gave stability to families who had spent years moving between temporary accommodations. Most homes followed a simple design: 2 bedrooms, a small lounge with a coal fire, a compact kitchen with a larder. Bathrooms were functional and often cold, but for many families, these homes felt like an upgrade from shared housing or prefabs left from wartime shortages. The estates created predictable routines. Children walked to school in groups, parents chatted at washing lines, neighbours knew each other by name. As the quality of life improved, something new emerged. Families began to imagine owning a home rather than renting one. Newspapers published stories about building societies offering new mortgage options. Young couples noticed semi-detached houses being built just beyond the council estate boundaries. They walked past construction sites on weekends and talked about saving for a deposit. The dream grew inside living rooms lit by small lamps and heated by coal fires. People wanted privacy, independence, and long-term security. They wanted their own garden, their own front door, and the freedom to make small improvements without permission from the council. This shift in desire changed entire communities and pushed thousands of families toward the mortgage market. The council house era had given people stability. Now it was giving them ambition. Between 1955 and 1960, Britain expanded outward. Suburbs grew at a pace the country had never seen. Builders developed long rows of semi-detached houses on former farmland. Young couples left crowded town centres and moved to streets that finally offered space, quiet, and a sense of progress. Cul-de-sacs became common. These short, curved streets promised safety for children and less traffic for families. Gardens followed a predictable pattern: a small front lawn, a narrow driveway, and a rectangular back garden with space for washing lines and a shed. These features were simple, but they represented opportunity. Families could plant flowers, store tools, or hang laundry without neighbours watching. Privacy became a new form of comfort. Suburban roads felt different from inner-city estates. They were cleaner, wider, and calmer. Local buses connected these new areas to high streets and factories. Weekend routines changed. People visited new parade shops, bought groceries at the local co-op, and drove to work in their Austin A35 or Ford Zephyr. House builders promoted these areas as the future of British living. Brochures showed tidy pavements, modern kitchens, and families smiling in newly built lounges. Couples walked through show homes on Saturdays and discussed which rooms they would decorate first. These suburbs reshaped expectations. They made home ownership feel reachable. They created a sense of independence that council estates could not match. And for thousands of families, this was the first real step toward a life defined by stability and long-term planning. By 1955, the mid-century British home had a clear identity. Most families lived in narrow lounges arranged around a coal fireplace. The mantelpiece held a few ornaments, a wedding photo, and the wireless tuned to the BBC Home Service. Furniture was practical. Sofas were firm, armchairs were heavy, and sideboards stored everything from rationing leftovers to Lyons tea tins. Kitchens were small and efficient. A single countertop ran along one wall. A gas cooker stood beside a shallow sink. Many homes still used a larder instead of a fridge. New appliances appeared slowly. A twin-tub washing machine, a chrome kettle, or a small electric heater signaled modern comfort. But space was limited, and families worked within the layout they had. Bedrooms followed a simple pattern: a double bed for the parents, a wardrobe with sliding doors, a chest of drawers that held neatly folded clothes. Children shared rooms in many households, often with small metal frame beds and patterned blankets bought from local markets. Floors were covered with linoleum in the kitchen and patterned carpets in the lounge. Walls held pale colors, usually cream or light green, chosen to brighten rooms during long winters. Windows were single-glazed, letting in drafts that every family knew well. This interior layout shaped daily life. Evening routines formed around the fireplace. Meals were prepared in tight kitchens. Children did homework at the dining table that doubled as a workspace. The mid-century home was compact, orderly, and designed for practicality above everything else. These interiors reflected the values of the decade: modesty, stability, and the steady move toward a new British life. In 1960, the price of a starter home in Britain was far lower than most people imagine today. A typical semi-detached house in a growing suburb could cost between $2,200 and $3,000. In some northern towns, prices were even lower. In parts of Lancashire, Yorkshire, and the Midlands, a modest two-bedroom terrace could be bought for around $1,600. Regional differences shaped the market. Homes near London or the south coast cost more, while Scotland and Wales remained broadly affordable for young couples entering the property ladder. These values made ownership feel realistic, even for families living on average wages. Many workers earned $12 to $18 a week. A careful household could save for a deposit over a few years. Building societies advertised simple repayment plans. Local newspapers listed new estates with fixed prices and steady terms. A typical monthly payment could be similar to the cost of running an Austin A35 or a Ford Popular. For many buyers, a semi-detached home was the main goal. It offered a private garden, a larger lounge, and better insulation than older terraces. The surprising truth is that some of these homes cost less than a modern small car. This comparison made the dream of ownership feel achievable. These low prices encouraged families to move from council tenancies to private ownership. They saw it as a chance to build security, gain independence, and invest in their future. The affordability of these homes shaped the character of British suburbs and influenced how families planned the next decade of their lives. By 1960, mortgages were becoming the main path to home ownership, yet many families only understood the basics. Most buyers dealt with building societies, not banks. These societies reviewed a family's income, checked employment stability, and decided whether the household could handle long-term repayments. A typical applicant needed a deposit of around 10 to 15%. Saving this amount often required strict budgeting, rationing habits that still lingered from the early post-war years, and support from relatives. Interest rates were controlled and fairly steady, usually between 5 and 6%. Building societies used simple rules. Monthly payments could not exceed a set portion of weekly wages. Many workers brought payslips from factories, rail depots, or local shops to prove their reliability. Couples applied together, but women's incomes were sometimes discounted, especially if employers expected them to leave work after having children. Repayment periods commonly lasted 20 to 25 years. Families understood that this commitment shaped everything else they could spend. Heating costs, coal deliveries, and electricity bills were calculated carefully. People compared mortgages with the cost of running a small car, like an Austin A35, to decide whether the household budget would stretch. A mortgage was not only a financial step, it was a social marker. Moving from council tenancy to private ownership meant progress. It meant responsibility. It meant entering a future built on steady payments and confidence in long-term employment. For thousands of families in 1960, signing those papers marked the moment when the dream of a permanent home finally became real. In 1960, monthly mortgage payments often consumed a large part of a family's income. A typical worker earned between $50 and $70 a month after tax. Many mortgages required $12 to $18 in monthly repayments. This amount looked manageable on paper, but it left little space for essentials. Coal deliveries, gas bills, and rising food costs took most of what remained. Families tracked every shilling. Many relied on strict routines shaped by the habits learned during wartime rationing. Budgets depended heavily on stable employment. Factory shifts, railway jobs, and shop work had to remain consistent. Any reduction in hours could threaten the ability to pay the mortgage. Households avoided unnecessary spending. New furniture was bought on hire purchase. Clothing was repaired instead of replaced. Weekly shopping lists were kept short, often focused on basic items from the local co-op. Unexpected expenses created real pressure. A broken boiler or a leaking roof could destabilize an entire month's budget. Many families waited years before decorating or replacing old carpets. Even a trip to the seaside required planning and saving. People accepted these limits because home ownership symbolized stability and progress. Living close to the financial edge was normal for new homeowners. They accepted discomfort in exchange for long-term security. The mortgage shaped every decision, every purchase, and every plan for the future. For many families, the monthly payment was both a burden and a source of pride, proving they had reached a new stage in British suburban life. By the late 1950s, renovating a home became a growing trend among new owners. Families wanted modern features, but professional labor was expensive. This led to a strong DIY culture. Weekend projects became common. People installed shelves, repainted walls, and replaced old fittings with items bought from local hardware shops. Many relied on basic tools, borrowed ladders, and advice from neighbors. Electrical work was often done without training. Homeowners added extra sockets to small lounges to power new appliances. Loose wiring and overloaded circuits were frequent problems. Fuse boxes were outdated. Coal dust mixed with electrical cables created additional risks. Kitchens were updated with new gas cookers, sometimes installed without proper ventilation. Building materials also carried hidden dangers. Asbestos was widely used in insulation boards, floor tiles, and roofing sheets. Lead-based paint was sold in most shops without warnings. Many families sanded old surfaces indoors, unaware of the health risks. Linoleum adhesives contained strong chemicals that filled small rooms with fumes. DIY projects were motivated by pride. Homeowners wanted to personalize their semi-detached houses and bring them closer to modern standards. They added wallpaper, fitted new curtains, and built small sheds in the back garden. Each improvement made the house feel more like a long-term investment. But many renovations introduced hazards that were not fully understood at the time. Improvised work created structural issues, electrical faults, and long-term maintenance problems. The desire to modernize quickly often overshadowed safety. This period shaped a generation of homeowners who valued self-reliance, but faced the hidden risks of mid-century materials and methods. Neighborhood life in the late 1950s shaped the identity of Britain's new homeowners. Streets in suburban estates were quiet, but they were never empty. Children played outside from morning to evening. They kicked footballs near cul-de-sacs, rode bicycles without helmets, and used the pavement as their main gathering place. Parents felt safe letting them roam because everyone knew the families living on both sides of the road. Wash lines created natural meeting points. On most days, rows of shirts and bedding hung across small gardens. Neighbors often talked while pegging laundry, sharing advice about boilers, drafts, or mortgage payments. These conversations built trust. People borrowed tools, swapped leftover wallpaper, and helped each other move furniture through narrow doorways. Corner shops strengthened the social fabric. Families visited the same butcher, greengrocer, and newsagent every week. Shopkeepers knew customers by name and often saved items for regulars. These routines created stability during a period when budgets were tight and mortgages demanded careful planning. Community events also played a role. Street parties were held on warm weekends. Children decorated trestle tables and adults prepared simple meals. Many households listened to the same BBC Home Service programs at similar times. This created shared reference points that shaped daily conversations. New homeowners rarely felt isolated. The design of 1950s estates encouraged interaction. Semi-detached houses sat close enough for neighbours to hear when coal was delivered or when a lawnmower started up. Windows were thin, fences were low, and gardens connected households without barriers. This network of relationships helped families manage the pressures of mortgages, repairs, and rising costs. The social fabric of these neighbourhoods turned streets into communities and made the experience of owning a home feel less daunting. Owning a home in 1960 carried a cost that went far beyond the mortgage. Families accepted financial pressure because the emotional reward felt greater than any monthly payment. A house represented stability after years of post-war uncertainty. It offered privacy, a small garden, and the freedom to make choices without council approval. These gains shaped how people viewed their future and how they raised their children. Daily routines revolved around maintaining the home. Families painted walls, cleared ash from coal fires, and managed moisture in small kitchens. Each improvement required time and effort. Homeowners budgeted carefully, repaired items themselves, and delayed purchases to protect their mortgage commitments. These sacrifices became part of the culture of responsibility that defined the era. The cultural value of ownership grew stronger as suburbs expanded. Couples believed a mortgage was a sign of progress. It separated them from the instability of temporary housing and placed them in streets where neighbors shared similar goals. Conversations about repairs, heating costs, and gardens reinforced this shared identity. A house became more than a structure. It became proof of hard work and determination. The true price included long-term commitment. Families accepted decades of payments because the reward felt permanent. A home anchored them to a community, offered security in old age, and created memories that shaped entire generations. Children who grew up in these houses still remember the sounds, the routines, and the sense of belonging that came with them. This is why the dream of ownership from 1960 still echoes today. It was not only about bricks and mortar. It was about building a life, finding stability, and creating a place that felt entirely their own.